Law 20, Part 2. Do not commit to anyone, stay above the fray, do not let people drag you into their petty fights and squabbles. Seem interested and supportive, but find a way to remain neutral. Let others fight while you stand back, watch, and wait. When the fighting parties are good and tired, they will be ripe for the picking. You can make it a practice, in fact, to stir up quarrels between other people, and then offer to mediate, gaining power as the go-between. The kites, the crows, and the fox. The kites and the crows agreed among themselves that they should go halves in everything obtained in the forest. One day they saw a fox that had been wounded by hunters lying helpless under a tree and gathered around it. The crows said, "We will take the upper half of the fox. Then we will take the lower half," said the kites. The fox laughed at this and said, "I always thought the kites were superior in creation to the crows. As such, they must get the upper half of my body, of which my head, with the brain and other delicate things in it, forms a portion." "Oh, yes, that is right," said the kites. "We will have that part of the fox." "Not at all," said the crows. "We must have it, as already agreed." Then a war arose between the rival parties, and a great many fell on both sides, and the remaining few escaped with difficulty. The fox continued there for some days, leisurely feeding on the dead kites and crows, and then left the place hale and hearty, observing, "The weak benefit by the quarrels of the mighty." Indian fables, observance of the law. In the late 15th century, the strongest city-states in Italy, Venice, Florence, Rome, and Milan, found themselves constantly squabbling. Hovering above their struggles were the nations of France and Spain, ready to grab whatever they could from the weakened Italian powers. Trapped in the middle was the small state of Mantua, ruled by the young Duke John Francesco Gonzaga. Mantua was strategically located in northern Italy, and it seemed only a matter of time before one of the powers swallowed it up and it ceased to exist as an independent kingdom. Gonzaga was a fierce warrior and a skilled commander of troops, and he became a kind of mercenary general for whatever side paid him best. In the year 1490, he married Isabella d'Este, daughter of the ruler of another small Italian duchy, Ferrara. Since he now spent most of his time away from Mantua, it fell to Isabella to rule in his stead. Isabella's first true test as ruler came in 1498, when King Louis XII of France was preparing armies to attack Milan. In their usual perfidious fashion, the Italian states immediately sought ways to profit from Milan's difficulties. Pope Alexander VI promised not to intervene, thereby giving the French carte blanche. The Venetians signaled that they would not help Milan either, and in exchange for this, they hoped the French would give them Mantua. The ruler of Milan, Lodovico Sforza, suddenly found himself alone and abandoned. He turned to Isabella d'Este, one of his closest friends, also rumored to be his lover, and begged her to persuade Duke Gonzaga to come to his aid. Isabella tried, but her husband balked, for he saw Sforza's cause as hopeless. And so, in 1499, Louis swooped down on Milan and took it with ease. Isabella now faced a dilemma. If she stayed loyal to Lodovico, the French would now move against her. But if, instead, she allied herself with France, she would make enemies elsewhere in Italy, compromising Mantua once Louis eventually withdrew. And if she looked to Venice or Rome for help, they would simply swallow up Mantua under the cloak of coming to her aid. Yet she had to do something. The mighty King of France was breathing down her neck. She decided to befriend him, as she had befriended Lodovico Sforza before him, with alluring gifts, witty, intelligent letters, and the possibility of her company, for Isabella was famous as a woman of incomparable beauty and charm. In 1500, Louis invited Isabella to a great party in Milan to celebrate his victory. Leonardo da Vinci built an enormous mechanical lion for the affair. When the lion opened its mouth, it spewed fresh lilies, the symbols of French royalty. At the party, Isabella wore one of her celebrated dresses. She had by far the largest wardrobe of any of the Italian princesses, and just as she had hoped, she charmed and captivated Louis, who ignored all the other ladies vying for his attention. She soon became his constant companion, and in exchange for her friendship, he pledged to protect Mantua's independence from Venice. Men of great abilities are slow to act, for it is easier to avoid occasions for committing yourself than to come well out of a commitment. Such occasions test your judgment. It is safer to avoid them than to emerge victorious from them. One obligation leads to a greater one, and you come very near to the brink of disaster. Baltasar Gracian, 1601 to 1658 AS. One danger receded, however, another, more worrying one arose, this time from the south, in the form of Cesare Borgia. Starting in 1500, Borgia had marched steadily northward, gobbling up all the small kingdoms in his path in the name of his father, Pope Alexander. Isabella understood Cesare perfectly. He could be neither trusted nor in any way offended. He had to be cajoled and kept at arm's length. Isabella began by sending him gifts: falcons, prized dogs, perfumes, and dozens of masks, which she knew he always wore when he walked the streets of Rome. She sent messengers with flattering greetings, although these messengers also acted as her spies. At one point, Cesare asked if he could house some troops in Mantua. Isabella managed to dissuade him politely, knowing full well that once the troops were quartered in the city, they would never leave. Even while Isabella was charming Cesare, she convinced everyone around her to take care and never to utter a harsh word about him, since he had spies everywhere and would use the slightest pretext for invasion. When Isabella had a child, she asked Cesare to be the godfather. She even dangled in front of him the possibility of a marriage between her family and his. Somehow it all worked, for although elsewhere he seized everything in his path, he spared Mantua. In 1503, Cesare's father, Alexander, died, and a few years later the new pope, Julius II, went to war to drive the French troops from Italy. When the ruler of Ferrara, Alfonso, Isabella's brother, sided with the French, Julius decided to attack and humble him. Once again, Isabella found herself in the middle, the Pope on one side, the French and her brother on the other. She dared not ally herself with either, but to offend either would be equally disastrous. Again, she played the double game at which she had become an expert. On the one hand, she got her husband Gonzaga to fight for the Pope, knowing he would not fight very hard. On the other, she let French troops pass through Mantua to come to Ferrara's aid. While she publicly complained that the French had invaded her territory, she privately supplied them with valuable information. To make the invasion plausible to Julius, she even had the French pretend to plunder Mantua. It worked once again. The Pope left Mantua alone. In 1513, after a lengthy siege, Julius defeated Ferrara, and the French troops withdrew. Worn out by the effort, the Pope died a few months later. With his death, the nightmarish cycle of battles and petty squabbles began to repeat itself. A great deal changed in Italy during Isabella's reign. Popes came and went. Cesare Borgia rose and then fell, Venice lost its empire, Milan was invaded, Florence fell into decline, and Rome was sacked by the Habsburg Emperor Charles V. Through all this, tiny Mantua not only survived but thrived, its court the envy of Italy. Its wealth and sovereignty would remain intact for a century after Isabella's death. In 1539, the eagle and the sow. An eagle built a nest on a tree and hatched out some eaglets, and a wild sow brought her litter under the tree. The eagle used to fly off after her prey and bring it back to her young, and the sow rooted around the tree and hunted in the woods, and when night came she would bring her young something to eat, and the eagle and the sow lived in neighborly fashion. And a grimalkin later plans to destroy the eaglets and the little sucking pigs. She went to the eagle and said, "Eagle, you had better not fly very far away. Beware of the sow. She is planning an evil design. She is going to undermine the roots of the tree. You see, she is rooting all the time." Then the grimalkin went to the sow and said, "Sow, you have not a good neighbor. Last evening I heard the eagle saying to her eaglets, 'My dear little eaglets, I am going to treat you to a nice little pig. Just as soon as the snow is gone, I will bring you a little young sucking pig.'" From that time the eagle ceased to fly out after prey, and the sow did not go any more into the forest. The eaglets and the young pigs perished of starvation, and grimalkin feasted on them. Fables, Leo Tolstoy, 1828–1910. Interpretation: Isabella d'Este understood Italy's political situation with amazing clarity. Once you took the side of any of the forces in the field, you were doomed. The powerful would take you over, the weak would wear you down. Any new alliance would lead to a new enemy, and as this cycle stirred up more conflict, other forces would be dragged in until you could no longer extricate yourself. Eventually, you would collapse from exhaustion. Isabella steered her kingdom on the only course that would bring her safely through. She would not allow herself to lose her head through loyalty to a duke or a king, nor would she try to stop the conflict that raged around her that would only drag her into it. And in any case, the conflict was to her advantage. If the various parties were fighting to the death and exhausting themselves in the process, they were in no position to gobble up Mantua. The source of Isabella's power was her clever ability to seem interested in the affairs and interests of each side while committing to no one but herself and her kingdom. You lose all initiative once you step into a fight that is not your own choosing. The combatants become your interests. You become their tool. Learn to control yourself, to restrain your natural tendency to take sides and join a fight. Be friendly and charming to each of the combatants, then step back as they collide. With every battle, they grow weaker while you grow stronger with every battle you avoid. When the snipe and the muscle struggle, the fisherman gets to benefit. Ancient Chinese saying, keys to power. To succeed in the game of power, you have to master your emotions. But even if you succeed in gaining such self-control, you can never control the temperamental dispositions of those around you, and this presents a great danger. Most people operate in a whirlpool of emotions, constantly reacting, churning squabbles and conflicts. Your self-control and autonomy will only bother and infuriate them. They will try to draw you into the whirlpool, begging you to take sides in their endless battles or to make peace for them. If you succumb to their emotional entreaties, little by little you will find your mind and time occupied by their problems. Do not allow whatever compassion and pity you possess to suck you in. You can never win in this game. The conflicts can only multiply. On the other hand, you cannot completely stand aside, for that would cause needless offense. To play the game properly, you must seem interested in other people's problems, even sometimes appearing to take their side. But while you make outward gestures of support, you must maintain your inner energy and sanity by keeping your emotions disengaged. No matter how hard people try to pull you in, never let your interest in their affairs and petty squabbles go beyond the surface. Give them gifts, listen with a sympathetic look, even occasionally play the charmer, but inwardly keep both the friendly kings and the perfidious Borgias at arm's length. By refusing to commit and thus maintaining your autonomy, you retain initiative. Your moves stay matters of your choosing, not defensive reactions to the push and pull of those around you. The price of, while a poor woman stood in the marketplace selling cheese, a cat came along and carried off cheese. A dog saw the pilferer and tried to take the cheese away from him. The cat stood up to the dog, so they pitched into each other. The dog barked and snapped. The cat spat and scratched, but they could bring the battle to no decision. Let's go to the fox and have him referee the matter, the cat finally suggested. Agreed, said the dog. So they went to the fox. The fox listened to their arguments with a judicious air. Foolish animals, he chided them, why carry on like that? If both of you are willing, I'll divide the cheese in two and you'll both be satisfied. Agreed, said the cat and the dog. So the fox took out his knife and cut the cheese in two, but instead of cutting it lengthwise, he cut it in the width. My half is smaller, protested the dog. The fox looked judiciously through his spectacles at the dog's share. You're right, quite right, he decided. So he went and bit off a piece of the cat's share. That will make it even, he said. When the cat saw what the fox did, she began to yowl. Just look, my part's smaller now. The fox again put on his spectacles and looked judiciously at the cat's share. Right you are, said the fox. Just a moment and I'll make it right. And he went and bit off a piece from the dog's cheese. This went on so long, with the fox nibbling first at the dog's and then at the cat's share, that he finally ate up the whole cheese before their eyes. A treasury of Jewish folklore. Nathan Ausubel, ed. 1948. Slowness to pick up your weapons can be a weapon itself, especially if you let other people exhaust themselves fighting. Then take advantage of their exhaustion. In ancient China, the kingdom of Qin once invaded the kingdom of Qing. Huan, the ruler of a nearby province, thought he should rush to defense, but his advisor counseled him to wait. Qing is not yet going to ruin, he said, and Qin is not yet exhausted. If Qin is not exhausted, we cannot become very influential. Moreover, the merit of supporting a state in danger is not as great as the virtue of reviving a ruined one. The advisor's argument won the day, and as he had predicted, Huan later had the glory both of rescuing Qing from the brink of destruction and then of conquering an exhausted Qin. He stayed out of the fighting until their engagement in it had worn each other down, at which point it was safe for him to intervene. That is what holding back from the fray allows you. Time to position yourself to take advantage of the situation once one side starts to lose. You can also take the game a step further by promising your support to both sides in a conflict, while maneuvering so that the one to come out ahead in the struggle is you. This is what Castruccio Castracani, ruler of the Italian town of Lucca in the 14th century, did when he had designs on the town of Pistoia. A siege would have been expensive, costing both lives and money, but Castruccio knew that Pistoia contained two rival factions, the blacks and the whites, which hated one another. He negotiated with the blacks, promising to help them against the whites. Then, without their knowledge, he promised the whites he would help them against the blacks. And Castruccio kept his promises. He sent an army to a black-controlled gate to the city, which the sentries of course welcomed in. Meanwhile, another of his armies entered through a white-controlled gate. The two armies united in the middle, occupied the town, killed the leaders of both factions, ended the internal war, and took Pistoia for Castro. Preserving your autonomy gives you options. When people come to blows, you can play the mediator and broker the peace while securing your interests. You can pledge support to one side, and the other may have to court you with a higher bid. Or, like Castruccio, you can appear to take both sides, and then play the antagonists against each other. Oftentimes when a conflict breaks out, you are tempted to side with the stronger party or the one that offers you apparent advantages in an alliance. This is risky business. First, it is often difficult to foresee which side will prevail in the long run. But even if you guess right and ally yourself with the stronger party, you may find yourself swallowed up and lost or conveniently forgotten when they become victors. Side with the weaker, on the other hand, and you're doomed. But play a waiting game and you cannot lose. In France's July Revolution of 1830, after 3 days of riots, the statesman Talleyrand, now elderly, sat by his Paris window, listening to the pealing bells that signaled the riots were over. Turning to an assistant, he said, "On the bells, we're winning. Who's we, mon prince?" the assistant asked, gesturing for the man to keep quiet. Talleyrand replied, "Not a word. I'll tell you who we are tomorrow." He well knew that only fools rush into a situation that by committing too quickly you lose your maneuverability. People also respect you less. Perhaps tomorrow they think you will commit to another, different cause since you gave yourself so easily to this one. Good fortune is a fickle god and will often pass from one side to the other. Commitment to one side deprives you of the advantage of time and the luxury of waiting. Let others fall in love with this group or that. For your part, don't rush in, don't lose your head. Finally, there are occasions when it is wisest to drop all pretense of appearing supportive and instead trumpet your independence and self-reliance. The aristocratic pose of independence is particularly important for those who need to gain respect. George Washington recognized this in his work to establish the young American Republic on firm ground. As president, Washington avoided the temptation of allying with France or England, despite the pressure on him to do so. He wanted the country to earn the world's respect through its independence. Although a treaty with France might have helped in the short term, in the long run, he knew it would be more effective to establish the nation's autonomy. Europe would have to see the United States as an equal power. Remember, you have only so much energy and so much time. Every moment wasted on the affairs of others subtracts from your strength. You may be afraid that people will condemn you as heartless, but in the end, maintaining your independence and self-reliance will gain you more respect and place you in a position of power from which you can choose to help others on your initiative. Image, the thicket of shrubs. In the forest, one shrub latches onto another, entangling its neighbor with its horns, the thicket slowly extending its impenetrable domain. Only what keeps its distance and stands apart can grow and rise above the thicket. Authority, regard it as more courageous not to become involved in an engagement than to win in battle, and where there is already one interfering fool, take care that there shall not be two. Baltasar Gracian, 1601–1658. Reversal, both parts of this law will turn against you if you take it too far. The game proposed here is delicate and difficult. If you play too many parties against one another, they will see through the maneuver and will gang up on you. If you keep your growing number of suitors waiting too long, you will inspire not desire but distrust. People will start to lose interest. Eventually, you may find it worthwhile to commit to one side if only for appearance's sake, to prove you are capable of attachment. Even then, however, the key will be to maintain your inner independence to keep yourself from getting emotionally involved. Preserve the unspoken option of being able to leave at any moment and reclaim your freedom if the side you are allied with starts to collapse. The friends you made while you were being courted will give you plenty of places to go once you jump ship.